This is the General Overseas Service of All India Radio. Namaskar. The news snippets. Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Kosi Rail Mahasetu in Bihar through virtual mode. The 516 crore rupee bridge is 1.9 kilometers long. It will be of strategic importance to India-Nepal border area. The bridge was completed during the nationwide lockdown due to COVID-19. The bridge was a demand of the people for the last 86 years. Prime Minister Modi spoke with the King of Bhutan, Jigme Khesar Namgyal Wangchuk. The king had called to greet the Prime Minister on his birthday. Mr. Modi said India would be ready to provide all required support to Bhutan for the effective management of COVID-19 in the country. Prime Minister Modi also spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Putin also greeted the Prime Minister on his birthday. The two leaders reiterated their strong commitment to further strengthen the special and privileged strategic partnership between India and Russia. Sri Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa also greeted Mr. Modi. Both the Sri Lankan leaders expressed their strong desire and commitment to further deepen the bilateral ties. They expressed their appreciation to India for extending help during the COVID-19 pandemic. Union Minister for Chemicals and Fertilizers D.V. Sadananda Gowda has hailed the Indian pharma industry for their role during the testing time of COVID-19. He expressed the hope that India's pharma industry will be among the first to develop and supply low-cost vaccines for this pandemic. Prime Minister Modi has said that many forces are trying to mislead the farmers. He allayed concerns on the passage of farm bills. Mr. Modi said that these bills will provide new opportunities to farmers to sell their produce and will lead to increased profits for the farmers. 41,12,551 people have recovered from COVID-19 in the country. In the last 24 hours, a whopping 87,472 recoveries were reported by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. The recovery rate is 78.86%. At present, the active cases are 19.52%. 10,06,615 tests for COVID-19 were conducted in the past 24 hours. Authorities say the recent surge in cases is due to increased testing. China has started military drills near the Taiwan Strait as a U.S. State Department official is on a visit to Taiwan. China accused U.S. of using Taiwan to control China. Citizens of the tiny Solomon Islands have urged their government to immediately stop Chinese visitors from entering the country. The remote islands have no COVID-19 case, and citizens feel that allowing people from China would put the local population at grave risk. And that is the end of the news snippets.
Welcome to Delhi, Ashwin, and congratulations for another edition of the series.
Thank you, Monica ji. Always delighted to be in Delhi, and this particular book has lots of linkages to Delhi. So I'm doubly excited.
Let's take our listeners to a trip of the book or some writings which is really touched your heart and you want the listeners to be hooked on to that.
So I'm reading from the very first page of the book. The Indians saw them and were paralyzed with fear. The weather that day had been unforgiving. Icy winds howled in chorus with bursts of thunder and rain. the men of the 17 Mountain Division braced themselves for the worst as sleet hit their faces like bullets. At a height of 14,000 feet, the plateau of Doklam lay on the border between the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan and its superpower neighbor China. The loftiest points of the plateau lay on its western shoulder between Batang La and Mount Gipmochi. From there, the plateau sloped downwards towards the southeast. The Chinese called it by a different name, Donglang. In fact, they claimed it as their own, but their efforts to build a road through the plateau had triggered a flashpoint with India. Bhutan's long-standing friend and ally, India, knew that a road through Doklam would give China the ability to enter Indian territory with little effort. Halting the Chinese was not an option, it was an imperative. The commander of the Indian side looked through his binoculars with bated breath. All he could see was desolate, rock-covered land. He wondered why they were fighting at all. There seemed to be so little to gain by acquiring vast expanses of barren stone. And then he saw them and found himself utterly and helplessly afraid. A hero is no braver than an ordinary man, but he is brave 5 minutes longer, he reminded himself.
Very nice. How did the journey? What thoughts and how did you carve this?
You know, if you notice, there is one recurring pattern in the Bharat series books. Each book can be read independently. They are not connected. But the one common factor across all of them is the word Bharat. It denotes ideas. It denotes civilization. So for me, what is interesting is ideas, civilizations that emerged from roughly this space that we now call India, which could have been a much wider space at an earlier time. And that is what I wanted to bring out through the Vault of Vishnu.
That's very interesting. I want to know, for the benefit of our listeners, the words emerge or thoughts emerge, and what is the story behind imaginations or what?
Well, it always starts with the germ of an idea. There has to be a core idea. In my case, that core idea was Bodhidharma. Starting with Bodhidharma, then you realize that no, Bodhidharma was only one amongst many travelers. So Bodhidharma was one of the travelers who went from India to China. But there were several travelers who also came from China to India. And of course, the exchange was not a one-way exchange. There was exchange of ideas as well as goods, commodities. I mean, if you think about the entire Silk Road, the Silk Road became famous for the export and import of things like silk and jade and emeralds and diamonds and spices and cotton. But in addition to that, think about the fact that the Silk Road was also the transporter of things like, for example, Buddhism. Buddhism went from India to China in 70 AD. In fact, in China, there is a temple known as the White Horse Temple located in the town of Loyang. And the temple was created in honor of the two monks who arrived in China. They were seated on a white horse, and that white horse, on the side of its saddle, it had documents and manuscripts and parchments. Those were actually the original Buddhist texts. And those two monks sat at that spot for many, many years along with a team, translating all of those texts into Mandarin. And you see what eventually happened. Buddhism spread from China to the rest of the world. There are so many other concepts. So think about this, that in Xuanzang's time, the technology could travel from India to China. Several hundred years later, it came back from China to India. The exchange between these two countries was at multiple levels. And that is the sort of research that I wanted to do, and which is precisely the reason why I said that simply reading is not going to cut it. I will need to travel. So I spent almost about 8 weeks in China writing this book. After I was done with my research, you know how it works for most of my Bharat series books. Typically, there have been 6 books in 12 years. So the average is 2 years per book. The first 1 year is spent on research. The next 2 months is spent on plotting. The next 6 to 9 months is spent on writing. And the final 2 to 3 months is spent on rewriting, on editing, polishing, proofreading.
How come you have decided for fiction only? How is the response of the readers? And I feel the real stories are more popular or not. What was the thing?
You see, the problem also to a very great extent, Monica ji, is that nowadays everything But from the earliest that I could think of, history has always been political. The narrative is something that everyone wants to own. For a good 50, 60 years after Indian independence, the historical narrative was owned by the leftist historians. In the last 10 or 15 years, we have much more of right or center right people in positions of power, as a result of which even the historical narrative, they want to push it towards that. The problem is that the equilibrium is lost somewhere. That either you want to push a right-wing narrative or you want to push a left-wing narrative. For a person like Ashwin Sanghi, who believes that history is just one version of events, you can never treat history as the de facto truth. It is not. It is one version of the truth. Your version may be very different to my version. And that is the reason why I find that the world of fiction is perfectly suited for that. Because I can try and present multiple narratives to you. And I can say, you know what? You're intelligent to make up your own mind. That's what I do.
You already mentioned that you stayed there in China for 2 months and then you started writing. It took you 2 years nearly. And I want to know, is there anywhere you got stuck and words were not coming or something of that sort, and then you were not satisfied with what you had written? The journey of the book.
People find it very strange when I say that I never land up in a situation where I have writer's block. I never have it. The reason for that is because I treat each book as a project, almost like a business plan. The way a businessman starts a business with a business plan, I always have an entire map in front of me. So once I know what is it that I'm going to be talking about, then the next step is researching it. And once I'm done with the research, then I will map all the research. I will then make a detailed plot outline which covers every twist and turn in the story right up to the final conclusion. So the time when I actually sit down to start writing a book, there is no possibility that I can ever be stuck because the map is entirely laid out in front of me. Now I already know whether I need to go left, right, east, west, whatever. It's all there in front of me. Every turn has already been plotted out. So I never face writer's block.
Oh, that's wonderful. And who are your pillars of strength? Your family or friends?
If you see my hand, you'll see all these dhagas. And these dhagas actually are various dhagas which have come from mandirs, they've come from gurdwaras, they've come from masjids. They are symbolic actually. If you notice, if you count, there are 5. There is the pink one, there is the yellow one, there is the green one, the black one, and the red one. The reason for this is because I am one of those who has always believed that the true essence of power is actually feminine energy. We worshipped this energy in the form of Shakti. Shakti can change the world, really. Somewhere along the way, we became obsessed with the masculine. Historically, we became obsessed with the masculine, as a result of which Shakti had to take a bit of a backseat. But really, if you think about this, let's look at various concepts which we consider to be opposites. We talk about the word hot and cold. Are these opposites? They are not opposites. Cold is simply the absence of heat. So when there isn't any heat, it turns cold. Correct? The same applies to, let us say, light and dark. We think of it as opposite. What is darkness? Darkness is the absence of light. Where you don't have light, darkness emerges. Similarly, in the world of energy, you have Shakti and you have Shiva. Where there is no Shakti, Shiva emerges. The absence of female energy is masculine energy. Masculine energy on its own does not exist. Now, when you start thinking of the world that way, then in my life, the greatest people in my life have actually been women. My mother, my first Shakti, she's someone who brought me into the world of reading. I could not have been a writer had I not been a reader. And it was my mother and my mother's family which inculcated the reading habit in me. So that came to me from her. The second Shakti in my life, my sister. My sister was the one who always told me that follow your heart's desires. Go where your passion takes you. So in that sense, my sister was a very important Shakti. The third is my wife. in the year 2002, when I was already a flourishing businessman, and I suddenly landed up in Srinagar and I decided to write my first novel, The Rosabal Line, that first novel would not have got written had it not been for my wife. So that is the third Shakti in my life. My fourth Shakti is my Rakhi sister. She is the sweetest, most adorable thing in my life. She brings me that excitement and that vivaciousness which keeps me motivated. She's the one who says, "Oh, I'm so proud of you." So she is that fourth Shakti. And the fifth is Ma Shakti herself. Because I realize when I read my books, after I've finished reading them, and I wonder, Ashwin, these are not your words. Where have they come from? Ma Saraswati has bestowed her blessings on me. That is Ma Shakti. So these are the 5 Shaktis in my life. They are the 5 pillars of it.
So beautifully you have purported women power, Shakti power. And I want to know what is coming next for the readers.
Well, right now, at this moment of time, I haven't yet finalized which will be the 7th book in the Bharat series. People ask me, is this the final one in the Bharat series? And I say, no, the Bharat series will carry on till the time I live. The only thing that will come between my readers and the Bharat series is my own death, as and when it happens. Till then, I want to carry on churning out one Bharat series book every 2 years. But what is the story idea for the Bharat series? Right now, there are 3 parallel story ideas going on, and I haven't zeroed in on one. So it will be another 2 months before I eventually zero in on one particular idea, which then I take up for research. So this is the first part of it. But during this 2-year window, I'm also going to be involved in a project where I'm going to be writing a story, but not as a book. I'm going to be writing it as a series for web streaming. So the idea is for Ashwin Sanghi to explore other forms of storytelling. So that is the plan for the next 2 years, a web series as well as a book.
You just mentioned that you are not able to realize that you have written these words. It's come from somewhere else. So are there any words you want to share with our listeners?
For me, the words are actually unimportant. I have always believed that the real strength lies in the story. Words, you could use 10 different words for the word that you used. How is the word important? Because someone who's reading it in Gujarati has not read this in English. So the English word is irrelevant to him. What is common across every one of these is the story. That is the real hero. In our country, we've always had a rich storytelling tradition in India. And think about this. The writing system that we now talk about only came to us during the Mauryan period. Brahmi script came in existence around 300 BC. But if you go back to the Mahabharata, we've dated it around 3000 BC. The Rig Veda is prior to 3000 BC. All of these things were being narrated without a script in place, by memory, oral transmission from one to the other. And that's the reason why you had storytellers who went from one village to another, telling that story. Today, we have multiple forms of storytelling available to us. We need to go back to our old tradition of storytelling rather than thinking of ourselves as writers. We are not writers, we are storytellers.
Very beautifully portrayed. Thank you so much.
Today's commentary is entitled India Joins the Jeddah Amendment, scripted by Dr. Lakshmi Priya, research analyst, Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis, New Delhi, and it is read by Kaushik Roy.
This is the Global News podcast of AIR World Service. We now bring you a commentary. India joins the Jeddah Amendment. It is scripted by Dr. Lakshmi Priya, research analyst, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis, New Delhi. India joined the Jeddah Amendment of the Djibouti Code of Conduct as an observer state following a high-level virtual meeting recently. New Delhi became a part of the team of existing observer states consisting of Japan, Norway, the US and the UK. India looks forward to working with the 18-member group towards coordinating and contributing to enhanced maritime security in the Indian Ocean region. Jeddah Amendment is a revised code of conduct adopted by the signatories of the Djibouti Code of Conduct in 2017. It emphasizes the adoption of national legislation to ensure effective protection of the maritime environment and calls the signatories to cooperate for repression of transnational organized crime, including terrorism in the maritime domain. It also insists on the adoption of security policies to safeguard maritime trade from unlawful acts and ensure safe operation of port facilities and stop illicit maritime activities, including illegal fishing. Further, it urges the participants to develop a national strategy for the development of the maritime sector and a sustainable blue economy for the generation of revenue, employment, and stability. Jeddah Amendment advises the member states to provide assistance and technical cooperation for the effective implementation of the Code of Conduct. It stresses on enhancing training for the management of the marine environment, particularly for the maintenance of safety, security, and law and order at sea, and aims to promote greater regional cooperation and enhance effectiveness in the prosecution of persons engaged in piracy and armed robbery against ships on the basis of mutual respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of member states. Jeddah Amendment builds on the Djibouti Code of Conduct adopted in 2009. The Djibouti Code of Conduct was a regional maritime security cooperation agreement established by the International Maritime Organization and focused mainly on piracy and armed robbery against ships in the Western Indian Ocean region, the Gulf of Aden, and the Red Sea. The signatories to the Djibouti Code of Conduct agreed to cooperate in the investigation, arrest, and prosecution of persons suspected of having incited, facilitated, or committed acts of piracy and armed robbery against ships. The signatories agreed to unite for the interception and seizure of suspect ships and committed to working together for rescue and care of persons, ships, and property subjected to piracy and armed robbery. Djibouti Code of Conduct had decided to collaborate in shared operations with naval forces of countries outside the region and was aimed at promoting the implementation of relevant aspects of UN Security Council resolutions dealing with the piracy off the coast of Somalia. It took into account the UN General Assembly Resolution 63/111 that concerns with transnational organized crime at sea, illicit trafficking of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, the smuggling of migrants and trafficking of persons, and threats to maritime safety and security. India has been increasing its footsteps in the Western Indian Ocean. India has joined the Jeddah Amendment as an observer state when China has been making concerted efforts to expand its military influence in the Indian Ocean region ever since Beijing's 2015 Defense White Paper called for a change of approach from near seas defense to far seas protection. China recognizes the global strategic significance of the Western Indian Ocean and has enhanced the capacity of its Djibouti naval base to dock an aircraft carrier which will enable it to intervene militarily across the Indian Ocean. Joining Jeddah Amendment will provide India an opportunity to cooperate on maritime security with the countries of the Middle East and East Africa while safeguarding its own interests. The Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, that were of secondary significance for India as per the 2009 Indian Maritime Doctrine, have become an area of primary importance for the Indian Navy as India is paying greater attention to developing relationships at the key entry points in the Western Indian Ocean, which is crucial for India's push for regional connectivity and a free and open Indo-Pacific. That was a commentary. India joins the Jeddah Amendment. It was scripted by Dr. Lakshmi Priya, research analyst, Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis. It was read by Kaushik Rai. This broadcast came to you from the Global News Podcast of All India Radio World Service.
Hi guys, my name is Jasvi and today I am here with you to discuss that how can something pertain to an environment. So first we'll understand what is environment. Environment is the sum total of all the conditions and that affect the development and life of the organisms on the earth. Now, as we know that nowadays people are affecting our environment a lot and damaging an environment. So, how to conserve it? So guys, I have a solution for you. Yes, it is very simple and very easy to perform. You have to do nothing in that solution. Just you have to plant a tree on your birthday. As the population of India is 1.3 billion. And if you plant a tree and each people plant a tree, then the 1.33 billion trees are planted in a year. So imagine that will conserve our environment a lot. And second step, you have to follow the strategy of 3R, that is reduce, reuse and recycle. In this method, you have to take out the recyclables from giving out them, and because you know that food material can survive the recycling process and drain the material, it will enhance our environment and conserve it also. Last step but not the least step, you have to take the jute bag instead of polythene bags while going to the market, as you know that the polythene bags will not allow the rainwater entering to the earth's surface. So I had told you the 3 steps to conserve our environment. First, very easy, that you have to plant a tree on your birthday as it will conserve our environment. Second step, you have to follow the strategy of 3R, reduce, reuse and recycle. It will enhance our environment. Third step, that is you have to take the jute bag instead of polythene bags. When we heal the earth, we heal ourselves. Stay safe, stay healthy and thank you.
Hello everybody, this is Arambhavi. Today I am going to tell you a new recipe which is called sweet and salty cookies. The first cookie I made is a sweet cookie. It's a very quick recipe. I'm going to tell you the recipe of the sweet cookie now. We take a chocolate cookie or any choice of cookie and then we put some syrup on it, like this syrup, strawberry syrup, and then we can put tutti frutti, we can put chocolates on top of that to dress it. I did dress it up with tutti frutti. I had one bite, it was very tasty. Let's go on the salty cookies. So I did do on the salty cookies, I did take a cookie, I did make cubes of slices of cheese, and then I did put the cheese slice on the biscuit. Then I did put tomato pieces on that. I didn't taste it right now, but I am going to taste it and tell you how is it.